I was driving to hear my late son's will. My heart was heavy, and my hands trembled as I held the car keys. He had been gone for just 3 weeks, and the pain still felt as sharp as the day I got the call. As soon as I got into the car, my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, came rushing toward me. She was out of breath, her face pale. She shouted, "Don't start the engine! Your daughter-in-law! She was here earlier!" A chill ran down my spine. My daughter-in-law, Emma, had been acting strangely ever since my son's death. She barely spoke to me, avoided eye contact, and seemed far too concerned about the inheritance. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. Mrs. Carter explained that she had seen Emma lurking around my driveway just an hour earlier. She thought she heard a strange sound, like someone fiddling under my car. I immediately dropped the keys from my hand. My heart pounded in my chest. Could it be possible? Could Emma have tampered with my car? I called a mechanic friend who lived 2 blocks away. When he checked, his face turned grim. "Sir, your fuel line was cut. If you had started this car, it would have caught fire within minutes." I staggered backward, feeling my knees weaken. My son was gone, and now, was his wife trying to get rid of me too? But why? I couldn't think straight. I took a cab to the lawyer's office, my mind racing the entire way. When I finally arrived at the will reading, I saw Emma already seated in the front row. She was dressed all in black, her face perfectly calm, too calm. But the moment she saw me walk through the door, alive and unharmed, she froze. Her face turned pale, and then she fainted on the spot. The room fell into stunned silence when Emma fainted. 2 people rushed to her side, trying to wake her up. The lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Perhaps we should wait a moment before proceeding." I stood there, frozen, watching her. My mind was torn between grief and suspicion. I wanted to believe Emma was just a grieving widow, overwhelmed by emotions, but the look of terror in her eyes before she collapsed told me otherwise. After a few minutes, Emma regained consciousness. She refused to look at me, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened the sealed envelope containing my son's last will. According to the wishes of the late Daniel Harris, his estate will be divided as follows. To his wife, Emma Harris, he leaves the family home and half of his savings. To his father, John Harris, he looked up at me briefly, he leaves the other half of the savings, his personal belongings, and full authority over his business shares. The words hit me like a thunderclap. Daniel had entrusted me with control of his company, something worth millions. My eyes flicked toward Emma. She was trembling, her hands clutching her dress. Suddenly, Emma interrupted, her voice shaking. "This can't be right. Daniel promised me everything. He said I would inherit the company too." Mr. Reynolds calmly replied, "I assure you, Mrs. Harris, this document was signed and witnessed legally. There are no errors." The atmosphere grew tense. Everyone could sense Emma's anger boiling beneath her grief. For a split second, I saw the same cold determination in her eyes that Mrs. Carter had described earlier. That night, as I returned home, my mind replayed the day's events. Why would Emma risk sabotaging my car? Was she desperate for money? Or was she hiding something much darker? I barely slept. At dawn, I received a phone call that shook me to my core. It was Detective Howard, a close family friend. He spoke carefully. "John, we found new evidence about Daniel's death, and I think you need to hear it in person." The following morning, I drove to the police station, my stomach churning with unease. Detective Howard greeted me in his office with a firm handshake, his face serious. "John," he began, "we've been re-examining the circumstances of Daniel's death. At first, it looked like an accident. His car skidded off the road, but new evidence suggests it might have been tampered with." I felt my blood run cold. Tempered? By whom? Howard leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We found tool marks on the brake lines. Someone cut them deliberately. And we also discovered fingerprints on the hood of Daniel's car. They belonged to Emma Harris." My chest tightened. My son's wife. Could she really have done this? Howard continued. We also dug into Daniel's financial records. Just weeks before his death, he changed his will, giving you full authority over his company. We believe Emma knew about this and had a motive. The room spun around me. You're saying she killed him? For money? Howard sighed. We can't prove it fully yet, but John, you need to be careful. If she tampered with your car, too, it means she's desperate and dangerous. As I drove home, my mind raced. Every memory of Emma replayed in my head. The forced smiles, the cold glares, the way she avoided talking about Daniel's last days. That evening, I decided to confront her. I went to her house. She opened the door slowly, surprise flashing across her face when she saw me standing there. Emma, I said firmly, we need to talk about Daniel's death. She froze, her eyes darting nervously. What about it? It was an accident. Was it? Or did you make sure it wasn't? Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. I could see the fear in her eyes. Suddenly she whispered, You weren't supposed to be alive today. My heart nearly stopped. The truth was right there, slipping from her mouth. Before I could react, she slammed the door shut in my face. I stood on her porch, trembling. Emma wasn't just grieving. She was hiding a deadly secret. I stood outside Emma's door, her chilling words echoing in my head. You weren't supposed to be alive today. Those words confirmed everything. She had tried to silence me, just like she had silenced Daniel. But why? Money? Or something more? The next morning, Detective Howard called me again. John, we've traced some unusual bank transactions in Emma's account. Large sums of money transferred from an unknown source. We suspect blackmail or payment for something illegal. I frowned. So she wasn't acting alone? Detective Howard nodded. That's what we're trying to figure out. Someone might have helped her or hired her. Later that evening, I couldn't stop myself. I drove past Emma's house. Through the window, I saw her pacing the living room, clutching her phone, speaking in a hushed but frantic tone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see fear on her face. The next day, during a meeting with the company board, another shocking piece of the puzzle fell into place. One of Daniel's close associates, Mr. Lang, pulled me aside. Mr. Harris, before Daniel died, he was investigating some irregularities in the company accounts. He suspected that money was being stolen. He told me he feared someone close to him might be involved. My stomach tightened. Could Emma have been embezzling from the company, too? That night, I received a letter slipped under my door. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. It read, Meet me at the old warehouse near the docks. Midnight. I know what Emma did. I debated for hours whether it was a trap, but deep down I knew this was my chance to uncover the truth. At midnight, I went to the warehouse. The place was dark, filled with the smell of rust and old wood. Suddenly, footsteps echoed. Out of the shadows stepped Mrs. Carter, my neighbor, the same woman who had warned me about the car. Mr. Harris, she whispered, looking around nervously. I saw Emma the night Daniel died. She followed him when he left the house. Later I heard her return alone, in tears, but she wasn't crying from grief. She was angry. Before I could respond, a loud bang echoed in the warehouse. A door slammed shut, and then Emma's voice rang out, cold and sharp. You should have stayed out of this, John.
The sound of Emma's voice sent a shiver down my spine. Mrs. Carter clutched my arm tightly, her face pale with fear. From the shadows, Emma emerged, holding something metallic in her hand. At first, I thought it was just a flashlight, but when the light flickered, I realized it was a wrench. Her knuckles were white from gripping it so tightly. "You don't understand, John," Emma hissed. "Daniel betrayed me. He wasn't the man you thought he was." My heart pounded. "What are you talking about? He loved you. He trusted you." Emma's eyes burned with anger. "He was planning to leave me. He found out I'd taken money from the company. He said he would divorce me, expose me, and leave me with nothing. I couldn't let that happen." Mrs. Carter gasped, covering her mouth. The truth was spilling out like poison. Emma continued, her voice breaking between rage and tears. "I didn't mean for it to happen that night. I just wanted to scare him, to make him listen. But when I cut the brake line, it was too late. He was gone." I felt my knees weaken. The confirmation of my son's murder crushed me like a weight I couldn't bear. But Emma wasn't finished. "And you," she spat, pointing the wrench at me, "you weren't supposed to be here either. Daniel gave you everything. I couldn't let that stand." She took a step closer. Mrs. Carter tried to shield me, but Emma's rage was uncontrollable. Suddenly, flashing lights cut through the darkness. Police sirens. Detective Howard and 2 officers stormed into the warehouse. "Drop it, Emma," Howard shouted. For a moment, she hesitated, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Then, with a scream, she flung the wrench to the ground and collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. The officers restrained her, and Howard looked at me gravely. "John, it's over. She just confessed to everything." I stood there in silence, staring at the woman who had once been part of my family. My son's wife, the mother of my grandchild, now revealed as his killer. As they dragged her away, Mrs. Carter whispered, "At least now you have the truth." But the truth didn't bring me peace. It only deepened the emptiness inside me. The warehouse was silent, except for Emma's sobs echoing off the walls. Detective Howard patted my shoulder. "John, she's in custody. It's finally over." I nodded, but my mind felt hollow. Daniel was gone, Emma had been unmasked, yet the sense of loss weighed heavier than ever. I stepped outside into the cold night air, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of everything. The next few days were a blur. Police statements, court filings, and interviews filled my hours. I learned the full extent of Emma's deceit. She had manipulated accounts, threatened witnesses, and tried to bribe several employees to cover her tracks. The more I heard, the more I realized how close I had come to losing everything. Not just Daniel, but my own life, too. One morning, I visited Daniel's grave. The sun was barely rising, painting the cemetery in soft gold light. I knelt, placing my hand on the cool stone. "I wish you were here, son. I wish things had been different." Tears rolled down my cheeks, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and relief. Weeks later, the company meetings resumed under my leadership. Daniel had left explicit instructions to protect his employees and continue his projects. I found solace in honoring his wishes, channeling my grief into responsibility. Every decision reminded me of him, guiding me to act not just for profit, but with integrity. Mrs. Carter remained a constant support. One evening, over tea, she said gently, "John, you saved yourself. You were careful, and you survived. That counts for a lot." I smiled faintly, knowing she was right, but I also knew survival came with scars that time could never erase. Finally, the court case against Emma concluded. She was sentenced for murder, fraud, and attempted tampering with evidence. The legal closure helped, but it didn't replace Daniel. Each morning I still felt the emptiness in my home, the silence where his laughter used to be. Yet life moved forward. My grandchildren visited often, filling the house with warmth and love. Their innocence reminded me that despite the tragedy, there was still hope, still reasons to live and protect what Daniel had cherished. Late one night, as I looked out over the city skyline from my office window, I whispered to myself, "I survived. I must honor his memory." It was the first time in weeks that I felt a flicker of peace, not complete, but enough to remind me that even after betrayal, loss, and danger, life could go on. And in that quiet moment, I realized, while the past could never be undone, I had the power to shape the future. For Daniel, for myself, and for those who still depended on me. The nightmare had ended, the truth had been revealed, and somehow, despite everything, I had survived to tell the story.
The weeks passed slowly, each day bringing new revelations. Emma's trial exposed details even I hadn't imagined. Her manipulation extended beyond the company. She had forged documents, coerced witnesses, and even attempted to frame other employees to cover her tracks. It was chilling to see how far her desperation had gone. I spent many nights sitting alone in my study, Daniel's photograph before me. Memories of him, his laughter, his advice, and his dreams. All of it haunted me. But alongside the grief, I felt determination. He had trusted me with everything, and I had to honor that trust. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter called me with urgency. "John, you need to see this," she said. She handed me an envelope containing a letter written in Daniel's handwriting. It was addressed to me, and it had been sealed before his death. With trembling hands, I opened it. Daniel's words were calm, almost soothing. "Father, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. Know that I trusted you to carry on not just the company, but our family values. There may be times when fear and anger cloud your judgment, but remember to act with integrity. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. Live fully, even in my absence." Tears streamed down my face as I read. It felt as if Daniel was speaking to me one last time, guiding me through the chaos he had left behind.
Meanwhile, the company began recovering from the damage Emma had caused. With Daniel's instructions and my oversight, projects restarted, and employees regained confidence. Each success reminded me of Daniel's vision and strengthened my resolve to fulfill it. But even as life returned to a semblance of normalcy, I remained vigilant. Strange phone calls, anonymous messages, and the lingering suspicion that Emma might have had accomplices kept me on edge. Detective Howard reassured me frequently, yet I knew I couldn't afford complacency. One night, I walked through the now quiet office, reviewing old files. A folded note slipped from a ledger caught my eye. It read, "Some truths are buried, waiting to be uncovered. Stay alert." My heart raced. Was this a leftover from Emma, or had Daniel anticipated something else? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but it also strengthened my resolve. I realized that survival meant more than escaping danger. It meant understanding the depth of human motives, learning from mistakes, and protecting what mattered most. At home, my grandchildren's laughter echoed through the halls, their innocence a reminder that life goes on. Each smile, each question, each tiny hand reaching for mine reminded me that the future still held light, even after darkness had touched every corner of our lives. And yet, as I prepared for another day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't entirely over. Emma had been caught,
but the ripples of her actions, the shadows of betrayal, and the weight of my son's absence lingered. Life, I realized, was a delicate balance between the past's lessons and the courage to face the unknown. For now, I survived. I endured, and I would continue, one careful, determined step at a time. The following weeks were tense. Emma remained in custody, but the lingering fear of hidden threats gnawed at me. Detective Howard stayed in close contact, assuring me that investigations were ongoing. Yet every anonymous note, every unexplained phone call reminded me that the danger hadn't fully vanished. One evening, while reviewing company files late into the night, I noticed irregularities in the accounts Emma had tampered with. Some transfers had originated from an untraceable source, a shadowy figure who might have orchestrated her actions or even paid her to execute them. I called Howard immediately. "Detective, I think Emma wasn't acting alone. There's another player we haven't identified yet." Howard's voice was grave. "I suspected as much. There's evidence that someone else may have been manipulating her. We're tracing leads, but these things take time. Be careful, John." The next day, I decided to confront the company employees discreetly. In private meetings, I asked questions about unusual behavior, unexplained absences, and any knowledge of Emma's schemes. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. A junior accountant, nervous and hesitant, finally admitted, "There was someone else. Emma mentioned he'd guide her, help her cover things up. She never said his name." My heart pounded. The shadow of another conspirator added layers to the tragedy. Who could it be? Someone inside the company, or an outsider with their own agenda? Meanwhile, I had to keep the business afloat. I worked night and day, ensuring projects continued, employees were reassured, and financial losses were minimized. Daniel's vision became my anchor, each decision made in his memory with integrity and care. Late one night, as I left the office, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. A figure moved inside, seemingly watching. My pulse quickened. I called Howard, whispering details into the phone. Within minutes, a squad of officers arrived, surrounding the car. The figure attempted to flee, but was caught. A man in his early 40s, sharp-eyed, exuding cold calculation. Under questioning, he confessed. He had been Emma's secret accomplice, feeding her information, transferring funds, and ensuring she would act on his instructions. His motive? Greed and revenge against Daniel for exposing his minor frauds months before. Relief and anger warred inside me. The threat was neutralized, but the depth of betrayal stunned me. Emma had been just one piece in a dangerous puzzle, and it took all my courage and vigilance to survive. The following weeks were a slow, rebuilding process. I strengthened security measures, audited the company thoroughly, and personally met with employees to restore trust. The weight of responsibility was immense, but I felt Daniel guiding me, whispering through memories, urging me to continue. At home, life gradually regained warmth. My grandchildren's laughter filled the rooms, a steady reminder that, despite loss, hope persisted. I realized that even amidst betrayal, grief, and danger, life demanded resilience, and I had learned, painfully but surely, that survival required vigilance, wisdom, and the courage to face the unknown. As I closed the office late one evening, I looked at Daniel's photograph on the desk. "I'll protect everything you loved," I whispered, "and I'll make sure your legacy endures." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. Hard-earned, fragile, yet undeniable. The shadows of the past lingered, but the path forward was mine to shape.
The arrest of Emma's accomplice brought a sense of relief, but also new questions. How deep did the conspiracy run? How much damage had been done, and how much remained hidden? Detective Howard assured me that the investigation would reveal everything, but I knew I couldn't wait passively. I had to act. I spent days combing through company records, emails, and transactions. Slowly, patterns emerged: unauthorized transfers, altered contracts, and backdated documents. Emma hadn't been acting impulsively. She had meticulously planned every move, and her accomplice had been orchestrating it all from the shadows, ensuring she remained just one step ahead of suspicion. I called Howard with my findings. "Detective, it's worse than we thought. They weren't just after money. They were trying to dismantle the company and ruin Daniel's reputation. We need to trace every transaction, every connection." Howard nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we also need to be careful. They are dangerous, and desperate people act unpredictably." Over the next week, I worked closely with the authorities, providing every bit of evidence I could find. Together, we uncovered a network of small but significant frauds, all pointing to a coordinated attempt to take control of the company and divert funds. Emma and her accomplice had almost succeeded. At the same time, I had to maintain normalcy at the company. Employees looked to me for guidance and reassurance. I held meetings, reassured clients, and implemented stricter financial controls. Each action reminded me of Daniel's teachings: lead with integrity, act decisively, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. One evening, while reviewing old correspondence, I found a journal Daniel had kept. In it, he had recorded concerns about trust, about hidden motives, and about people who might seek to exploit him. Reading his words felt like a direct conversation with him. His foresight, his wisdom, his understanding of human nature, it all guided me as I navigated the chaos left behind. Finally, after weeks of investigations, the authorities had enough evidence to press additional charges against Emma and her accomplice. Court hearings revealed the full scope of their deceit, fraud, and attempted murder. Emma remained remorseful in court, though the coldness of her actions before couldn't be undone. As the legal battles concluded, I realized that surviving the storm was just the beginning. Rebuilding trust, maintaining the company's legacy, and protecting my family's future required constant vigilance. I had learned that evil can be cunning, but courage, intelligence, and moral resolve can prevail. At home, the children's laughter and warmth were my anchor. Each day, I felt Daniel's presence, not as a ghost, but as a guiding force in my actions. His legacy, both in the company and in the values he cherished, was safe. Late one night, I sat alone in the office, looking out at the city lights. The battles were over, but the lessons remained. Betrayal could strike at any moment. Danger could lurk in unexpected places, and life could change in an instant. But I had survived, and that survival carried with it responsibility to honor Daniel, protect my family, and guide the company toward a future he would have been proud of. For the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, weary smile. The darkness was real, but I had emerged from it stronger, wiser, and more determined. And though the scars of loss would never fully fade, I knew that life, with all its complexities, was still worth living and worth protecting. Weeks turned into months. The dust of Emma's trial and her accomplice's exposure began to settle, but the echoes of their betrayal lingered. I focused on rebuilding the company, restoring trust among employees, and ensuring Daniel's vision endured. Every decision, every meeting, every policy I implemented carried his spirit, his ethics, his foresight, his unwavering commitment to integrity. At home, life slowly regained warmth. My grandchildren became a source of light in the otherwise shadowed world I had navigated. Their laughter,
innocence and unfiltered joy reminded me daily that hope survives even in the aftermath of tragedy. I spent hours teaching them, listening to their dreams and sharing stories of Daniel, keeping his memory alive in a way that no trial, no betrayal, and no loss could erase. One evening, as the city lights flickered outside my office window, I reflected on the past year. The near-death experiences, the betrayals, the revelations, they had all left scars, both visible and invisible. Yet they had also taught me resilience, vigilance, and the depth of human complexity. I realized that life's trials often reveal the strength within us, the courage we didn't know we possessed. Detective Howard remained a close confidant. He often reminded me, "John, surviving this is more than luck. It's wisdom, caution, and heart. Daniel would be proud of how you've handled everything." I nodded silently, appreciating his words, but knowing that the true measure of survival was the lives I protected and the legacy I preserved. Months later, a commemorative event was held at the company, honoring Daniel's memory. Employees, friends, and family gathered to celebrate his achievements and the values he had instilled. I spoke to the crowd, my voice steady, despite the tremor of emotion inside me.
Daniel trusted me with more than a company. He entrusted me with his values, his vision, and the responsibility to protect the people he cared about. We have endured loss, faced betrayal, and navigated danger, but we remain stronger for what we've overcome, guided by integrity and bound by the lessons he left behind. Tears welled in many eyes, including my own. For the first time, the weight of grief felt balanced by purpose. Daniel's absence was palpable, yet his presence in every decision, every success, and every act of kindness reminded me that he lived on through us. At home, in the quiet evenings, I would sit by the fireplace, listening to the soft sounds of my grandchildren at play. I reflected on the journey, from the devastating night of Daniel's death, through the treacherous schemes, to the eventual unmasking of betrayal. I realized that survival was not merely escaping danger. It was about embracing life despite it, protecting those we love, and turning pain into wisdom. Emma's incarceration served as a reminder of human greed and the dangers of unchecked ambition, but the stronger lesson was resilience. I had endured heartbreak, faced peril, and preserved what mattered most. And in doing so, I had honored Daniel, not only through the company, but through the lives and love of those still around me. Late at night, I looked once more at Daniel's photograph on the mantelpiece. Whispering softly, I said, "I've survived, Daniel. I've honored your memory, protected your legacy, and I will continue to do so. Life moves forward, and so will I, guided always by your lessons and love." The journey had been long and harrowing, but the truth had been revealed, justice served, and life, though forever changed, carried a new light. The shadows of betrayal had passed, and what remained was the enduring strength of family, the warmth of memory, and the courage to face the unknown with unwavering resolve. I had survived the nightmare, and now, finally, I could breathe, knowing that Daniel's spirit and the values he cherished would continue to guide us all.